So here we are with the build video for the Hawker Sea Fury by Airfix 1/48 scale. It's a brand new release. Now before we get into the build, there's been a few things said about this kit, so it's just worth addressing some of those which I've seen here. So it basically evolves around the fuselage halves, and we've something funny is going on here a little bit. None of this is a massive problem, certainly not in my eyes. But we do have, here you should be able to see that there's a bit of a mismould there. Now this is anything from what you see here to the whole of this tail piece missing as far as I can see. So it's this look of the drawer with which kit you've got. This is what I've got. But with all that said, there does seem to be a noticeable difference between the two fuselage halves. I say noticeable, I mean you have to look for it. At first glance I totally missed all of this, but for some reason there's more heavier panel lining and recessing on this side than there is this side. And after looking at it and with the rest of the kit, I would actually say, I think from Airfix's point of view, they prefer it to be like this side, where it is actually quite a lot deeper. And this panel here it really is quite thick and deep. This side is quite refined. They're still obviously as wide, but they're not as deep. But when you look at the rest of it, I've got a piece here. I mean, this lines up with those panel lines more than it does this. So something just to bear in mind there. There is a difference. It's not noticeable. I'm by no means worried about this at all. When the kit is together, you just won't see any of this as much of a problem unless you get right down and look for it. Now, if you're like the high percentage of people that would be buying this kit to build out of the box because they like a Sea Fury, you probably find most of them go in stashes for a few years and don't get built at all. This isn't going to be a problem. If you are a sort of competition builder and you build to a high level and it needs to be perfect, then there is issues with this kit, and you're probably going to find that they put you off the kit a little bit, and that's fine. It is very heavily panel lined, and some of the raised rivets and that sort of thing are a bit heavy, I guess is the word. Personally, from a model kit point of view, it's great. It's a new tool, Sea Fury 1/48. It's going to go together quite nice. I've already had a go at that, and as you can see here, we've got new, this is something to notice as well, we've got new locating pins, which actually give quite a stronger kind of lock. Well, they go together better, put it like that, and as you can see, there's no issue there. There's no warping. It's a nice shape. It's gone together very well, and it's not going to cause any, there's no big steps or anything. So from that point of view, it's fine. From a detail point of view, again, it's fine. Yes, a little bit on the heavy side. So just something to bear in mind depending on what type of modelling you want to do. And jumping straight into the build sequence, the first page is the cockpit, as with most aircraft, and we've got a nice tub here, and then the parts that go around that to make up for the rest of the cockpit. Now with the seat here, you've got nice detail here on the back of the seat and a cushion inside the seat. However, there is absolutely no option for seat belts. A little bit of an issue, not so much from my point of view, because I'm building this as the Yeovilton one, and I've put up a photo montage of the one at Yeovilton. I was in there, and there aren't, from what I can tell, there's only lap harnesses, and so that makes my life a little bit easier, and I can make those looking at them. They're very sort of basic lap harnesses. I'll have to check that in a bit more detail. I would have thought there would be shoulder harnesses as well, but I couldn't see any when I was in there. I did look for them, and if you can see where I take the picture of the chair, there is a bar at the back where presumably those harnesses would go, and they're not on there. So anyway, I'm going to build it as I saw it with those pictures, so that's enough of an excuse for me. So I'm just going to put a couple of lap harnesses around the side, probably make those straight out of masking tape. Now we've got the cockpit, the instrument panel. Now this is a bit of a glaring mistake from Airfix, and I've got no idea why, unless they saw said aircraft that I'm talking about, because there's no gun sight included. and that's a bit of a glaring oversight. Now hopefully, this is pretty new after the kit has come out. Hopefully if you give it a couple of weeks, you might find that's the sort of thing Quick Boost might release, for instance, and you know, for a couple of quid you can get yourself a resin gun sight. I think there's one in the new Edward Cockpit set as well. So again, depending on how much detail and whether it's an issue for you, or you could obviously scratch build one, but you'd be looking at a Tempest gun sight. That's basically what you're after. There may even be some of those in 1/48 on the market already. So just something to bear in mind. And I've left all the parts separate, and then going to spray them up and bring them together. Now it is quite a nice fit. If I can just show you here, everything sort of slots in nicely to make up your cockpit tub. Then you've got the rear wall here which goes in, and in the instructions it makes quite a point of getting those parts lined up like this, and then they fix into the fuselage half, and then the side walls link in like this. They've actually fallen off there, but you get the idea. They stick into a little cutout here and on the instrument panel, and that makes up your side walls, giving you the framing and making up quite a nice cockpit tub. And the only one thing to mention is this part here. I've noticed that across this kit there are some odd things happening, and this is a bit of classic Airfix. This part here was heavy, and I'm really heavy in flash, very large sprue gates, and it was all I could do to get it off without snapping it. Now I don't know why these things are happening in a brand new Airfix kit. I saw someone else mention this in a review. It's almost like Airfix are making, lots of forward steps, but you can't rely on it. Every kit that comes out, it might have some of the old issues that we've had 10 years ago, but in other areas it's miles ahead, so it's hard to know. We had the thing in the 262 as well. There was a few strange bits for a brand new kit. Not an issue. We're talking about a part that's going to be right up the front here. I'm not sure whether you'd even see it, so as long as you can get it off the sprue gates and clean it up as much as you're sort of happy with, it pops in here and it's going to be out the way and out of trouble. So I've managed to keep the part together, and it just slots in at the front here, and again it's going to be under the instrument panel and out the way. So whether that's going to be a massive issue for you or not, I'm not sure. Probably not, but something to look out for, and just take care when you're getting that bit off the sprue. If you've built the 1/72 P51D that Airfix has done, it's very reminiscent of their control lever, which the control lever and the aerial in that kit was the antenna mast, was known for almost being irrelevant because you just couldn't get it off the sprue gates without snapping it, and this is very much the same. Rest of the parts, no problem, and they come off really well, very highly detailed, and it does almost feel like across the kit we've got a few sprues that are totally unaffected and feel very modern, then you've got a couple that feel like the older types of sprues, and this has come off of one of those. This sprue here, for instance, it's got a bit of flash around, and everything's a little bit odd with it, so just something to look out for. Now I'm going to go ahead and spray all this up now separately and start to just do a very subtle bit of weathering. Again, we're doing a clean finished aircraft, so that's something new for me. Literally no weathering, a little bit in the cockpit but not on the outside. I'm going to hit it with, I think, I've been thinking about this, rubber black. The colour in Tamiya that is the replacement for what the Humbrol colour is semi-gloss black, but I feel like that's going to be a little bit too black, if that makes sense. So this is a slightly off black. It's got a touch of grey in it, and it does come through. So I thought, well, if I spray it with this colour, I can always then go darker if I need to get more of a black colour through. I'm also probably going to use something like the smoke wash as well. It's not a wash. The smoke colour, and turn it into a wash just to give a bit of a dark look across the cockpit. The long and short of this is it's meant to be, it's coal black, I think the colour is called, and it's a glossy colour. So I'm going to paint it with this, which is matte, and then give it a bit of a gloss varnish, and then try and tone it down and try and get a sort of semi-gloss look. So maybe mix a bit of matte with some clear varnish, and that should give us the look. Now also I'm going to be tested a little bit here. I've got to paint these side panels. We've got decals for the instrument panel, which is a great feature, but there's nothing supplied for the side panels here, and there are a few instruments running down the side here, so I'm going to try and paint those, and we'll see how we get with that. So we'll check back in, and I'll be starting to paint parts of the cockpit. We should have it all in this colour, and hopefully I've picked out a few of these instruments, and probably starting on the decals for the instrument panel. Struggling with the light a little bit here, but hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on now. So this is the this is the first stage of the painting for the cockpit there. Now it does look a bit strange, I'll give you that, but I'm following the pictures to the letter, and that's pretty much the base colours from what I've seen. Quite an important feature. I've seen this mentioned on another channel as well, where they were talking about tyres and having the people tend to do a wash on tyres. If you're doing a dust wash, that the dust gets into the tread pattern, but it's the other way around generally. It's so what I'm saying is they put a dark wash on the inside, but generally it's the pads are dark and the wash, the light colour is on the inside of the tread, and that happens to be the same in the photo for this back plate there. So what I've done is painted it a buff colour and then run in some of the Flory Models light wash, and that's picked up the recesses. I'm not sure how well that's showing, so it's actually highlighted the bits. It's run into the panel lines, we call them, because I can't quite think of what it is, where the stitching would be. So that's given the effect I was after. It does look a bit, you know, it looks a bit jarring, I would say, same as that leather colour there. But you've got to bear in mind, we're looking at this as base colours, there's not been a wash. Although we're doing a clean kit, you know, it's still going to have a wash and everything. So that will tone everything down and blend it together. So that's why it looks a bit garish. And the fact that it's a black cockpit, it's pretty difficult to get anything to kind of liven up in there at the minute. So it's not a problem. I'm enjoying it. It's I know what's coming, but it can look when you're doing this sometimes, if you were to stop at just the base colours and then not do a wash, it would look a bit strange. But you'll see when we get through. I will do an oil wash in here, and you'll see how it pulls it all together. So that's how I'm getting on there so far. You won't be able to see this, but well, you might be able to. I don't know. I think you might be able to pick up some of it here. I've tried to replicate some of the writing that's all along the sides here, which is a green writing, I suppose, so it shows up on the black. And those harnesses in there, flap harnesses, for the same reason I mentioned at the start of the build. I'm not going to do shoulder harnesses because I didn't see any in there, and I've just made those out of Tamiya masking tape, so and painted them the leather colour, which again I've blown up on my phone, and I've matched it to it, and it's pretty damn close. So again, once it's had a wash, that should tone everything in. And there's not really much in there. It was useful doing this off black colour, because you might be able to see here quite a lot of the instrument panels and buttons are black, so doesn't really give you much to work with. So it's better starting with an off black colour. If you started with black, it would be quite hard to pick out the buttons then. It's hard enough as it is here. So that's how that's all coming together. So the next stage is I'm going to do a clear coat, a gloss clear coat in there, just to seal everything in, mainly as well to bring it together so that I can start with the decals for the instrument panel here. So again, you can barely see anything there. I can see a lot more detail. The camera's not picking it up. It's because it's so dark. But we've got raised instrument panels there, so there's decals to go into pretty much all of those as far as I can see. So I'm looking forward to getting those in. That should give that a bit of a lift. And this is one of those cockpits that you can actually see quite a lot. There's quite a large hole in the top of the airframe, so it's worth trying to pick out as much detail as you can. Quite a lot of it is actually lacking, and you would see the difference here. If you really wanted this to pop, the Edward set would be the way to go, I think. And after looking at that set, there was quite a lot of dials and stuff on there, so it would give it a lift if that's what you're after. But working with the kit parts, looking at the photos, there was only, you know, a handful of dials this side and a couple that side, some which are not actually visible here, so that's how we're going with that. And again, I've painted the side here, part of the framing, so we've got grey instrument, I don't know what you'd call them, blocks here, electric points, and then we've got black wiring running through. So again, it's not very great from a modelling point of view, black wires and black frames, so it's a little bit hard to make that jump out. I might go over and just touch this with a bit of gloss at the end to give that bit more of a shine, because that's what it seems to have in the pictures. So yeah, anyway, pushing on quite nicely with the cockpit, and before too long we'll have that in the fuselage halves and be progressing with the build. Okay, so it's time for an oil wash in the cockpit. Now, excuse my little kind of slapdash way of getting my oil sorted here, and this green has nothing to do with it. That is unfortunately just dried on paint. So what I'm planning on doing is, because it's quite a dark cockpit, in fact, you know, it's pretty much black as we've discussed before, I'm going to try and highlight that with a little bit of a grey wash. Now again, with oils, this is not quite the colour I was thinking, but because we're dealing with oils, there's, yeah, it's not generally a problem. You can work it around, and it's better to. I prefer to start light, so I'm going for a kind of, I don't know what you'd call this, like a slate grey, I guess. And I'm just going to run it in, and then we'll see how that looks. And then maybe add some darker colours. All you're going to find is it's just going to add to the depth. That's all. It's not really going to make any mad cause any problems or anything. If it's too light, again, I just go in with a bit of darker colours and merge in with the oils anyway, and then melt them back. But you'll probably find this will all just go in and give quite a nice effect. So I'm going on quite heavy here at the minute, but that's not a problem. I can wick that off with a cotton bud afterwards. I just want to get it into all the areas and get it pooling up. Now, in and around the seat, I'm going to do a bit more. I'm going to be a bit more precise with the type of oil work that I do. So I'm just running in here with this grey at the minute, but we might come back in and try and make that leather look a bit more normal. So, and again, this is a restored bird that I'm trying to replicate here, so I'm not going to go over the top with this. I don't want it too weathered at all. I'm just trying to add a bit of depth, that's all, and break up the black. So on the instrument panel, again, I'm doing this before I put in the dials with the decals, because I don't want them I want them to be clean, so I don't want that to come across as being weathered. And then I'm just going to do these parts here on the side walls, and again, as you can see, just going on nice and thick, not really worrying about where it goes or what happens, because now I'm going to use a cotton bud and just try and wick off some of that where it's actually just trying to wick off some of that where it's pooling, and then that should show us what we've got, and try and give a bit more of a natural kind of look. Just have it sitting in the recesses of everything, so in the crease of where this seat cushion is, and all the rest of it. So I think that's looking pretty good, and then you can always lean. I always like to lean this because it's so thin, the mix I've done. It will then pool up in a place where you can access it if you can't quite get to it. So as far as the first pass, I think that's not bad at all. I'm just going to get it off that seat back because that will look a bit odd having grey on that colour. And then here on the instrument panel again, just sort of very lightly with the cotton bud here. I'm just trying to take it off of where it's in the high areas. I just want it in the recessed parts here. Now this is already wicked off a little bit where I've had it sat on the cutting mat there. So that's kind of done the job for us, but I'll just move that again. Right, so I think that's fine for the first pass. Now, as you can see, like I said, I've used a very light grey colour, and looking at it, you know, you're not struck by the fact of there's tons of this light grey colour running around. It's just started to add a little bit of depth. So now I'm just sort of wondering what to do next. I mean, obviously it's got a while to dry off. I'm just wondering if I just run around with a maybe a darker pass and a few other colours. I'm not sure yet. I might just what I will do is run across the side of this as well. Again, most of this is going to come off, but it will just give continuity across the whole cockpit. I don't want this then standing out as well, so just giving that a pass there, and then just a quick rub back with the cotton bud. All it does is acts as a filter, like we've discussed in many of the other builds I've done. You're kind of looking through this colour at the colour below, and it just gives it a different tone. So that's all we're trying to do there. Right, now I think I'm going to run in with a little bit of raw umber just around the seat here and the leather. So I'm going to do this in a different bit. Again, I think we've discussed it, but the more expensive oil paint you can buy, you know, price usually does matter with oil paint, and this is one of the best, you know. No problem with Winsor & Newton. I've got a very cheap set here as well mixed in. It just means they're a little bit bitty. So you'll find the consistency of Winsor & Newton oils, and any that you get that are above that, and the more quality oils they just break down very easily. And I don't know if you can see that there, but I mean that just went to nothing. Whereas, and you've got a few lumps I suppose in there, but the other cheaper stuff is extremely grainy. Once you've even done this, it's always got that graininess. And that can cause a little problem sometimes if it's too grainy. Especially if you're looking for a wash like I'm trying to do. These are kind of a bit of a borderline between pin wash and filter. And for those you don't want, certainly don't want any graininess. You just want it to wash over and find the recessed parts, I guess. Now, I don't get too hung up on worrying, you know, if I want to do a pin wash and it turns into a filter, or vice versa. You know, it is what it is. I don't worry too much, but this is meant to be, I guess, a pin wash, but again, I'm just slapping it on, so I'm sort of merging the ideas here a little bit, but these are generally more armour techniques. I haven't seen a lot of people doing this in aircraft too much. I like to merge it across. I think some of the armour techniques that I've learned when I used to do it, or I still do it obviously, with filters, pin washes, and then building up the layers, I think that's certainly got a place in aircraft. It seems to be the same process, but it has I don't know, it's almost looked at with different terminology as far as I can tell. It's not like a regimented process like there is generally in armour. Now this may seem like I've just put it on and rubbed it off and then done it again, but all I'm trying to do is just dull that colour down, and it's hard to see when you're on a gloss coat. It's also hard to see when the oils are still wet, but as soon as it dries down, and I'm hoping to do this in the Condor build that I'm doing, you'll find that you can get really great dust effects with oils. It is surprising just quite how useful they can be. And then if you don't obliterate that with a matte coat, you can actually you can get quite good effects. This is what I'm trying to work on. I'm 50-50. I'm trying to get around the sort of having to clear coat and matte coat and everything all the time, but at the same time, you know, there is a place. You know, before decaling, I've tried it without gloss coats in the past, and it's a lot. What's the word? It's a lot more safer and a lot more straightforward if you just hit it with a gloss coat. But I am trying to change that a little bit on a couple of the forums that I'm in, certainly with Flory models. I've tried it with a gloss coat, and it just, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that I know that the way he's doing it and a few guys on there tend to try and get away with the gloss coats these days, and it gives a very good effect. And even matte coating, you know, just using like buffers and polishing with cloths and stuff. There's a lot to be said for it, but I'm still kind of trialling the idea myself. I don't know, I don't think there's a right and wrong to any of it. Right, so, but I digress. So back to this and the oiling. I think that's working quite well now. Again, just trying to give it a little bit of depth. Now, I'm working more on this actual cockpit tub part that we got here, because the instrument panel, I mean, like I said, I've sat in the aircraft, I've taken the pictures, it's pretty clean. So I don't want to do anything, certainly not on any of the raw umber or anything around here. There are quite a few scratches, so I'm going to try and replicate those. It is a little bit beaten up around where the chair is. I mean, I was stood on the chair, so they, you know, they're pretty liberal when it comes to getting in and out of the aircraft. So it's not trying to keep it absolutely pristine. So we'll try and add a bit of that in as well. And the seat back was quite well worn as well, had quite a good patina on it. So yeah, I'm trying to tone down those lap harnesses as well. I assure you this is the colour they were, but it does, you know, it's standing out to me here, that kind of orangey leather colour. I suppose it's just not what you expect, but it really was what the colour is, so I'm going to stick with it. Maybe hit it with a little bit more raw umber like I just have. And then I'm actually going to leave that. I'm not going to whip that off, because that's actually giving it quite a nice bit of definition there. And also, with using the method of trying to take some of the oil off, you don't have to use a cotton bud. Now this is going to pull it all off. So if you've got a pull there, it will take the whole pull away. Now if you want to just be a little bit more, take a little less, you can use a dry brush, and then that will soak it up, and it won't soak up as much as the cotton bud will, because obviously that is, you know, that's a whole load of cotton wool, so it's very absorbent. Whereas this brush here, it's just soaking up a bit, but it's taken a while to go up, so you've got a little bit more control, and you can leave a bit more there. So I think I'm going to call that a day. I think I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to do any pigments or anything, because it wasn't dusty, it wasn't dirty, it was obviously clean, but it was just worn. And then I'm going to finish off with a little bit of chipping once the whole bit is together. I think I'm going to get the cockpit together and then just do some natural chipping, just getting in there. So with the oils applied here now, the thing to do is to let that dry off. Make sure that you're happy with it, because again, being oils, you don't have to worry. Plenty of time to work it. Once it's dried, I mean, it doesn't really dry, I suppose, over, you know, after a couple of weeks it will be properly dry. Maybe not as long as that, but it sometimes depends on how much oil is in the paint and all the rest of it. But if we use the terminology of once it's kind of dulled off and you can see the matte finish, you can decide whether that's what you're happy with, or whether you want to move it a little bit more, and then you just hit it with some thinners again and it will just start moving it again, and it reactivates it, and you can take it all off, you can leave it as it is, and anywhere in between. So that's really why I like using oils. I think they're fantastic medium to use for modelling. So I'm going to leave that now, and we've got decals to put on the instrument panel. I am contemplating building this electronic device up here. Now, after looking at it, I think it's probably going to be easier, because I don't really know where the placement is. It's sort of on the framing. So what I'm thinking about is getting the whole cockpit in, and then we've still got a little bit of play, and I think it sort of goes connected to the instrument panel, but it's also connected to this part here where the windscreen's going to go. So I'm thinking I might just paint it, finish it, and then just place it on afterwards. Just make it out of plasticard or something and just put it there. In fact, you've already got a raised bit there. I only really need to put a little like shroud. It's like a sun shield, so you can see the digital readout. So I think I might just put a shroud in there, paint this grey, do a little bit of dotting about with black buttons and stuff, and that should be enough of a representation for that. So yeah, it's starting to come together nicely, and you can see the shape there on the fuselage half. It's quite good. I like this kind of nose bit. When you're sat in the aircraft, I was looking down, it's almost like it's bulged there. It's a quite a pleasing aircraft shape wise. So there we go. We'll come back when I think we'll be getting the instrument dials on the instrument panel, glue it together, get the fuselage halves together, and progress with the build. I'm hoping this will be quite a quick build by the looks of it. I can't see there's going to be any massive problems. There's not a huge parts count, so we'll catch up on the next bit. Whilst waiting for the cockpit to dry, I'm just having a look through the instructions and wondering if I can do a few more bits to get prepared for once we've got everything together. And just looking through here, we've got the part for the the tail wheel wheel bay in here, and it's saying to do Humbrol 74. Use that colour, which is pretty much what this colour is. It's like a linen yellow kind of colour. Now I've just had a look at my reference pictures, and it's not that colour on the machine that I'm doing. So I presume this is like standard FAA colours for wheelbays and stuff of the period, but the one at Yeovilton is it looks like it's white actually, but I'm probably going to do an off colour, and so I'll probably mix something like white and XF19 to give a bit of an off-white colour, because it's not pure white, it's like a grey white. I'll put the picture up so you can see as I'm talking about this. So anyway, so that's something where I'm going to deviate, and then we've got the part here which has got to be done. So it's got the wheel bay here, and we're putting this part in like that, and then that's going to make up with this here. So that's the next pieces to go in. This doesn't look like, this looks like a bit of a vague fit here, making up this piece, so we'll have to watch that. Yeah, it doesn't really slot in. What have we got going on here? Right, so there is an alignment. There's a way of aligning it here, and that means that where you've got this part that kind of, it's sort of shaped to go that way, this part is also shaped to go with it. So we've just got to make sure that goes in like that, so it sits flush. Then that's going to come up to this bit, and we're going to stick it on there one way or another. There's no locating pins or anything. This is a bit of an unusual way to do this, I would say. So it sort of sits in there. So you're going to have to glue that into there, and then come down to it and pop it in like that, and with a bit of messing about you'll get it locked in like that. That's what I believe we're looking for. So again, strange way to do it, I guess, but that's the way they've done it, so that's what we'll have to do. So that's also going to be the white colour, and that's all going to go together here, and then it's going to sit in on this part here, which makes up the bottom of the fuselage. It's got part of the forward part of the fuselage as well. We'll start to get the shaping, and then it will block all of that in. So I'm probably going to go ahead and get all this glued together, and then I think we can probably still, whilst we're waiting for the cockpit, we can run on and do the cowling as well, and the engine, and the front cowl here. So I think we can get all this completed and painted up and together. Again, there's a part where I've got the exhausts going in, and I'm going to probably replicate the covers on those, which are at the on the machine that I looked at again, on the aircraft. So then I think once we've got all that together, a bit like with the Focke-Wulf, if you've got all these other parts all pre-assembled, then everything can be brought together and the kit will be assembled quite quickly then. Because then we're just on to the wing spars, which will already be going in. And then we're not doing a wing fold, so we're just popping those on. There's no ordnance for the aircraft, so it's not having any of that. And then we're straight on to undercarriage, and yeah, then we're pretty much there. So I'm going to push on with that. I'll do a bit on camera and a bit off camera, and I'll just talk about any points that I come across that are a bit of an issue. We've also got the machine guns going on there, the oil intake, oil cooler intake, and I'm not sure what this piece is here. There's a piece that goes around the front. That might just be for getting a better join, or it might actually be for the landing lights, so I'm not sure. We'll come to that at another point. So we're not drilling any holes here, but if you are doing one of the other the other option, or you're doing some aftermarket decals and you want to give it a load out, this is when you start drilling holes for that. So if you want to do, you've got the camera, or the fuel tanks, and you've also got, again coming up, you'll have drilling holes for the rockets or the bombs as well. I'm not going to be doing any of that in here, so I'm going to skip past it. So that is, when you get to these stages, you know, make note of this and drill the holes if you want them. And it's just worth noting that again, with this kit, I've mentioned it's almost like you've got some sprues that are of the kind of modern way of doing it and some that aren't. And this part here has very large sprue gates, so unlike some of the other sprues which got very fine sprue gates, this is, you know, this is way over the top. Again, it's not a massive problem if you've got basic modelling skills, but if you haven't, you know, you go in with your sprue cutters or your side cutters and you whack it like that and you get a massive dent in your piece if you're not careful. Sometimes you can be quite lucky and you'll bang it like that and it will be fine, but more often than not you get a dent coming out of the piece and then you've got to fill it, and it goes on and on and on. So it's a little bit annoying seeing that. And we've also got parts here. If I get my scriber, now I don't know if this is going to do it, but it's running down the panel lines. There you see it stops. The panel lines have got bits all along them, so you will need to run through these. They're not fully open, so you just need to run around them. And I've seen this on other reviews. Some are a lot worse than others. Some have massive bits stopping them. I'm actually quite lucky. I've just got small little pieces of plastic fouling it, and that will obviously stop your wash as you do your panel line wash and all the rest of it. So just run over the kit. It is a shame it's the Sea Fury that's got this. You know, this is a kit that would have been nice to have been absolutely bang up to date and problem free, but it does have a few issues running around it. Again, this is not a massive issue, but it taken with the rest of them, it does, you know, it's starting to build up to be a little bit of problems in this kit here and there. Again, not if you're looking at mine, but some other kits, you know, this is a lot worse. You know, some kits the tail is almost not even, you know, it's completely missing on one part. So yeah, just bear in mind, if you get any problems, Airfix are pretty good. I think it's probably easier just to contact them and try and get new sprues out with replacement parts. Anyway, that's enough slating the kit, and I'm going to crack on now and build this like I said earlier. I've gone ahead and got the wheel bays set into the part of the wing here now, and that's gone together no problem. Like we discussed earlier, it's worth just checking the fitting of these parts here and making sure it all lines up. I've also put the guns and the other few parts that are meant to go on there as well, and that has all gone in no problem. So that part is now ready for the fuselage to join, and then that will finish that up. And that is what makes that wing spar makes up the front of the wheel bay there, and that comes in as part of the fuselage. I've also been working on the cowling here in the front section of the fuselage and the engine, and a few slight issues here. This piece, which is the rear part, which is where the exhausts fit, it's just a little bit roughly moulded on one side. Here it's just a bit, I've noticed there's quite a lot of scuff marks from the mould, and and things are a bit misshaped, but it's all fine. It all comes out when you start sanding it, but it's just something to watch out for. And you've got arrows here pointing forward to denote where the engine goes, and that is in the front here. And that just sort of sits proud like that. And then the front ring goes on to that as well, and that slots into the engine blocks. So you've got these pieces here, and they just go into these cylinder heads there, and that all comes together then. Now the reason I've got one side one side unglued is because when I glued it all up, it didn't sit right. It sort of sat a bit proud, the ring. So there's a little bit of movement there. So what I'm going to do now it's all dried is get these parts together and then glue them once I feel as though they're in the position I want them to be. You have to make sure these bits line up with the notches here. It's very, because it does actually naturally sit in between here, but it's quite important it goes into the notches there. And then that makes up the piece, which is the front section of the aircraft. Now I don't know if you can see there, it is actually not a bad fit. So maybe just takes a bit of messing about and just checking, test fitting, because I'm pretty sure that should all sit quite flush. So just something to bear in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and get that together now, and then finish off the cockpit, get the fuselage halves together, and then we'll be starting to build up the aircraft. Okay, so I've got this part together now. I've made a little bit of a mess of it. Where I run glue in, it ran through. I had my finger on this side, so I've left a fingerprint, but that's okay. I'm going to have to sand it through anyway. So what I've done is I've glued the panels here in the centre section to the back piece, and as it's been lining up, just been using my finger on the inside just to poke it, just to make sure it's actually drying so it's level with the ring. And then I've pushed the front piece on once that's cured a bit with the engine here, and then done the same around the front. As you can see, we're a little bit gappy here and there, but that's there to give the adjustment for lining it up around the rest of the place. So I'm going to need to sand in just a couple spots here, just roughly just blend it in going back that way, and then I'll probably run just a very fine kind of liquid filler just in and around there, and then blend it back, and that's going to be barely noticeable. And then this part goes onto the front of the aircraft with it. What Airfix have done here, which is quite a good idea, they've got sort of slots that are sized for fitting everything. So you've got the slots for this bit to fit into the panels here. There's 2 slots, and then there's different size slots for the front ring to go on where the engine meets it as well. And again, the same as here. So you've got a bit of an indent there, which once this is part, with the fuselage, it slots in there quite nicely. So it's going to sit like that. So after a little bit of work, I'm happy with this section now. What I've done is lined it up, like I said, as best I could by pushing it like that. It was still a little bit out, and you've got this tab here showing you where the top side is, so it's going to be like that. So I wasn't very happy. I was looking down the line here, and this is actually, ironically, on the top. It's the one place you don't want it, is where the worst sort of bit was. It was kind of sitting proud this side and that side, and then as you ran around, it merged in quite nicely around the back, and you can see there, that's just the natural kind of panel line from the glue line. So what I did was just using various grades of sanding sticks. I just sort of sanded it back and blended it in, and then just went over with a bit of a sponge, a polishing sponge, to bring that back in. And then I've just run around with the trumpeter scriber using the flat blade like this, and I've just run around just to put back in that sort of definition of the front ring there. And yeah, that's fine. So I think now there's the one side. You can see that's glued up nicely there, there's no gaps, but here I'm just going to need to put a tiny bit of filler in there and push it in, and then just blend that back. There are two panels here, raised panels. This one I've sort of caught a little bit in the sanding, so what I might do is take that off completely and just put a strip of plastic card there. I'm undecided yet. I'll see if there's enough left there to show it, and then I might just go around it with the scriber instead. And yep, so that's that. That's the only real main problem I've encountered so far. So might not be with everyone's kit. Like I said, mine was moulded a little bit oddly. It was a bit rough on one side. It still is. It's a bit soft here. There's meant to be like a lip panel there, and on this side it's crisp. You might be able to hear that. Whereas this side, there's no crispness. You can't actually get in there and find the line. So funny all over the moulding of this kit. Some sprues are fine. There's a definite difference between the sprues in the moulding quality. So it's a bit of a shame. But nonetheless, pushing on with the build. And there we go.